Hello everyone and welcome back to another Wizard101 video. Today, I'm going to be doing another tier list video. It's been a while. I figure I might as well do one now. Just because I feel like it. You know, it's been a while, and I do generally like tier lists because they allow me to explain some thoughts in the game that I can't really explain usually without a video focused on it. So, you know, that's fine with me. We're gonna be listening to Marleybone music today. I'm just chilling in Regent Square here. If you look like this, there, I'm in Regent Square right now, just chilling, listening to the music. You can see this is the setup for today. Not the cleanest setup, but it's the setup that I have. You can see the bosses ranked in order. That is what I'm gonna be ranking. I don't know if I've already said that, but ranking all of the final bosses of every world. Now, I don't think. No, every world is on here, so that's really good. Definitely have some strong opinions on each of them, so I'm going to go into them. I'm going to try to remember their health as well and how difficult they are so that I can rank them properly. I'm going to add... You know what? No, I'm not going to add a row because I feel like you only really need 5 tiers with this many bosses. There's only a few. So, let's get into it. Lord Nightshade. Now, Lord Nightshade is... last boss of Wizard City. Leading up to that point, you discover that he is a servant of Malistaire, and you find out that Malistaire is going after the Croconomicon, and that's why you go to Crocopatra. So, you beat him up, whatever, then you go to Crocopatra. Now, the only thing I don't like about Lord Nightshade is the fact that I feel like he isn't ever present in the story, because the entire point of Wizard City is finding out where Malistaire went so that you can track him down. Now, Lord Nightshade definitely, you know, isn't that... I'm trying to describe what I'm thinking of. He isn't that bad of a boss. I just feel like he doesn't have a lead-in as much as I would like from like... The other bosses are ever present, for example. I can explain later, but I think that Lord Nightshade isn't as interesting as some of the other ones, but I'm going to put him into B because he's obviously iconic. You know, he's existed since the dawn of Wizard101, so iconic. I can't really put him lower than that, so I'll put him there. Next on our list is Crocopatra. Now, Crocopatra, if you didn't know, actually has a very interesting backstory. I've gone over this in my complete story of Crocopatra video, but she basically sparked a civil war between the two ruling kingdoms of the Crocs at the time, and killed off both of them and then rose to power. So she's ruthless, she's cunning, and honestly is pretty sick. I'm not gonna lie. I think that her trials in the end, the last dungeon, Temple of Storms, is really interesting, and I think as a final boss she works really well because you don't really know much about the Tut army. You just know that it's risen in the beginning, and then eventually it culminates to the fact that, oh, it's Crocopatra that's doing this, and it's, you know, I think that she's a good final boss. I think that if you don't know her backstory, she'll be significantly less interesting to you. I think if you don't, you should watch the complete story of Crocopatra. I have the playlist in my playlist section of the complete stories, but I definitely think she's interesting. Not an S tier villain, but definitely pretty good. Next is Meowyarty. Now, what I like about Meowyarty is, against Lord Nightshade, is the fact that he is definitely present in the story. Is you learn that you learn in the second arc right after Ironworks, I call it an arc, but it's like the second part of Marleybone. You learn that he's escaped from prison and he's working for Malistaire. He's a genius type character and has an elegance to him that I really like, and I think that he's definitely a solid A tier, similar to Crocopatra. I think definitely hunting him down was interesting. I also really like he's based on Meowyarty from Sherlock Holmes, and I really like that. I've always liked Marleybone, and I definitely think that Meowyarty isn't a bad villain. I like his genius type of vibe because we don't really get that with many other of these final bosses. He gives off the vibe that he's incredibly smart, which is something that I think is very interesting in villains. Next is Lord Bramble from Wisteria. Let's be honest, he's not that interesting. He just wanted to steal a Spiral Cup. He can control mines. I'll put him into C tier. He exists. That's fine. So that's cool. Next is the Jade Oni, which in regards to Mushu, it's a plot of the Onis, I believe, to take over Mushu. And Jade Oni kind of poisons the Emperor. And, well, I think Malistaire did that, but basically he inhabits the Emperor after Malistaire, right? And I think it's very interesting, their backstory. I don't think they're nearly as interesting as some other characters, but obviously the Jade Oni boss fight is kind of iconic, that 7.5 thousand health, which was a lot of health at the time. I think now it's 6,000, but before it used to be 7.5 thousand, so whatever. But I definitely think it is a fun boss fight, but I don't think he's nearly as interesting as a character as A and B, and I think that Lord Nightshade being with him actually matches quite well, because it's kind of like a interesting but not as interesting, more like an iconic boss fight. So there's that. Next is Malistaire Drake, and this is obviously an S tier. There's no other place this can be. It's such a, you know, a climax, right? You get to the end of Arc 1, and honestly, there's a reason why a lot of people think Malistaire is the best villain in the game, and it's because, generally, he has the most backstory, he has the most that you can sympathize with, or empathize with, whatever, one of the two, because he's just trying to revive his dead wife, you know? Like, it's one of those things where it's, if you give the evil character a backstory, and a backstory that people can empathize with and understand, it's a lot more likable of a character, which is why Morganth isn't as interesting, because Morganth is evil for the sake of being evil. Malistaire is evil because he just wants to be with his wife again, which is, you know, very poetic and dramatic, which is why obviously he's an S tier character. The boss fight is also iconic. It's a shame that it's not 10,000 health anymore. I thought the 10,000 health was a really good level for his health, but 8,000 is okay as well. I just don't like the fact that it's 8,000. I think 10,000 was a good number. Obviously, back in the day, it used to be 100,000. That might be a bit too much, but you know, whatever. I think that definitely a lot of people will agree with me here. Next is, who's this? Moonin Runeweaver or something? He's one of the final bosses in Ravenscar. I'm putting him into a hard C tier. Basically, they're trying to reawaken the ice giant Ymir. Not that interesting, and I've never found the Coven to be really all that of an enticing arc line. You know, just meh. Definitely. I think, on the other hand, though, Nordri is definitely a B tier. I think the giant sons of Ymir are definitely an interesting thing, especially how they operate. Like, for example, Sudri is like really based in honor, and he gives you his golden seal, despite the fact that you know, he doesn't really have reason to. And all of them give you their golden seal, you know, and while they do betray you in the end, I think that it's a lot more interesting of an arc line than you know, most. So there's that. Obviously, I think it's a very interesting, and it's definitely a semi-difficult boss fight, which is good as well. It also, I am ranking these on kind of difficulty, not difficulty as well. I'm ranking them on how interesting they are, but in regards to difficulty, these ranks still kind of stack up, because this one isn't that difficult, neither is this one. These ones aren't really that difficult, but they're not too bad. You know, it doesn't really stack up difficulty-wise, because Crocopatra is definitely not that difficult. I have died to her before soloing, but you know, I think that if difficulty, the ranks might change, but this is definitely interest in them. So, you know, hopefully you guys understand that. Next is Mithria. Now, if we're ranking difficulty, this would go up a bit, but this is interest. And let's be honest, Mithria isn't that interesting. She's a sun spirit celestial thing at the end of the Trial of Spheres. The Trial of Spheres is to determine your worth in Celestia, and you discover that we are worthy. So that's cool. I just don't think she's that interesting. Honestly, I think she's less interesting than these, but I hesitate to put her into D tier. I'll put her right here at C tier with Lord Bramble and Moonin. I think his name is Moonin. I don't think she's that interesting, to be honest. She is a bit more difficult than the rest of these. But for a culmination of an entire world, I think it's kind of a bit of a disappointing boss to go to. But if we're talking about disappointing bosses, this next one, the spiders at the end of Mirror Lake, those are an obvious D tier. They barely have any interest at all. They're just summoned by Morganth. They're spiders. I'm putting them into D tier, and there's nothing you can do to stop me, honestly. They're not that interesting. They're not even that difficult. They're just the last boss. And they're definitely just not that difficult. Even 4 level 70s could just use... Say there was 4 fires for some reason. They could all use Meteor Strike and probably end it first round. So, I'm just going to put them in a D tier where they belong. Next is the Pendragon. Well, okay, so technically, the final fight of Avalon is the Black Worm and the White Worm at the very end, which actually are semi-difficult, but not that difficult. Pendragon is the fight before. I would consider Pendragon to be the final fight, because it's kind of like the culmination of everything that has come, and you save King Arthur. I've always liked this fight. It's very poetic. You know, the hero fighting a dragon is definitely interesting, and I think it's definitely a culmination of the entire plot of Avalon. I would put it into A tier. It's between A and B for me, but I definitely enjoy the fight, and I enjoy how it goes, and I enjoy how it's culminated to that point. Next is Hades, the Unseen. Hades is definitely very interesting. I really like its culmination at the end of Aquila. I think Aquila was a really fun world with the bosses that it has, and I think that fighting the 3 gods again and on top of Hades was a very interesting fight, and it's honestly a really fun fight. So I would definitely put this up into A tier. I think that it's not only interesting, but it's fun, which is rare, you know, because a lot of these, while they're interesting, they're not as fun. Like Crocopatra isn't that fun of a fight. It's just you hit, she dies. You know, like Mithria is not a fun fight at all. But you know, I think that that's a fun fight. So yeah. Next is Malice Tara when he returns, and let's be honest, Malistaire is not as cool when he comes back the second time. I would even put him into B tier. He's just not as interesting. He's kind of controlled by Morganth, and he's dead. So there's that. Darkmoor isn't actually on here, but actually, if we would consider this the Darkmoor version, I consider this the final fight of Azteca because I think this is what it's trying to be. But if we consider him the Darkmoor version, I'd put him into A tier. But even then, I still think it's not as cool as the original Malistaire fight. Malistaire returns too many times, in my opinion. But I think that for being the last fight of Azteca, it's interesting. Because he definitely, you know, him coming back and, you know, seeing him on Jabalba is like, whoa, why is Malistaire here, you know? But it's like, not as interesting as some other fights in my opinion, but it's cool because that fight really is just you kill the other 3 bosses that are there and then he flies off Jabalba, presumed to be dead, but then we find out he landed on Darkmoor and now challenge us to Kandavasi. So nah. All right, now we're talking about Morganth. Now the fight itself is definitely interesting. I just don't like Morganth as a villain, to be completely honest. I've never liked Morganth as a villain because she's not that interesting. She's evil for the sake of being evil. Spider Girl, kind of interesting. In the end, she grows 8 legs and then falls into the void. I'm going to put this at A tier, surely for the fight alone and the culmination of Arc 2. I definitely like the last fight of Arc 2. I just don't like Morganth. Morganth isn't nearly as cool as Malistaire, which is the problem. But definitely there's similarities there, which is why I'll put it into A tier. It's at least interesting. Next is the rat, which personally I don't really like the rat fight. I think it's a bit complicated if I remember correctly, but it's not bad. I definitely think the rat as a villain is interesting, but not as interesting as it could be. I'm going to put him into B tier. I think that's fair. Next is Grandfather Spider, which you do fight a version of him at the end of Mirage. You also fight the Scorpion as well. If the Scorpion was on here, I'd probably rank him B as well. But Grandfather Spider, if we're ranking Grandfather Spider himself, I would put him at S tier. I think as, maybe not the fight specifically in Mirage, but I think that as a villain, Grandfather Spider was very, very interesting. And he actually had motives. Similar to Malistaire, he had motives for what he was doing, right? He wanted to regain his Heart of Darkness or whatever, which Grandmother Raven stole from him, and Grandmother Raven actually turns out to be quite the bad character, right? We learn that she's not all that she's cracked up to be. But Grandfather Spider actually has, you can sympathize with him, you know? It's very interesting. And I think that that's why he's similar to Malistaire. I think that both of them are genuinely interesting, you know, compared to Morganth, which realistically Morganth is only an A tier because I enjoy her fight, and it's a culmination of arc. It's definitely a good fight at the end of arc 2. That's why it's so high. But Morganth as a villain herself is a C tier character, right? I would definitely consider it C or lower. Next is Medulla, which I don't even remember this fight, to be completely honest. I mean, you guys can say I'm wrong if you want, but I'm going to put him into B tier. I don't really remember the fight all that much. Honestly, you could go into C tier. I'm going to put him into C tier, actually, because I don't really remember the fight. Nothing that interesting, I don't think. He controls people. That's cool. Not as interesting to me. If you disagree, let me know. And then finally is the Storm Titan, which I thought was an interesting fight. I'm going to put it into A tier. I think that it's less of an interesting character and more of an interesting fight. I do enjoy the cheats and how the battle goes. I think it's a fun battle. And overall, definitely shows that PvE can still be complex. So this is my ranking. You can tell, as I was going on, you can tell it's a mix of interest in the character and interest in the fight itself. Like, for example, Malistaire is interest in the fight and the character. Grandfather Spider is more interest in the character, but it's heavily outweighs the interest in the fight, but it's still enough to put him into S tier. You know, Crocopatra's interest in the character over the interest in the fight. Morganth's interest in the fight over the character. Same with Aether Titan. It changes. But let me know if you disagree with any of my rankings here. I personally think that this is where I would rank all of them in regards to my interest in them. But if you disagree with me, let me know. I can imagine some people will disagree with Lord Nightshade. They'll say Lord Nightshade should be an S tier because he's iconic. He is iconic, just not that iconic for me. Malistaire is definitely a more iconic. Medulla, I could see people disagreeing with him. Maybe Mithria. But that's really it. Let me know. Maybe not let me know your rankings if you don't want to do the full rankings, but let me know what you disagree with or agree with. And yeah. Drop like, hit sub button. Hopefully this is less controversial than my last two videos. I've lost like 7 subs on those videos, and I think it was the PvP people that I lost because I think they're like, wow, you roasted me too hard, I'm dipping, which is okay. You know, if you can't take me roasting you like that, then you shouldn't be here, is my point. So that's it. See you in the next video. Have a fantastic day. Thank you all for watching.